Hello everyone, and a happy new year. Today we'll be looking into my favourite class of locomotive, the A1X Terriers. Built between 1872 and 1880, the London, Brighton and South Coast Railways Class A1X is an 060 tank locomotive designed by William Stroudley. The class of 50 was built to run suburban commuter trains around London, and the locomotives acquired names of the stations they served on these routes. These would not be the only names the locos would be known by, including their nicknames such as Terriers or Routers. So why did they get these nicknames? Well, the name Routers comes from the early days and their South London crews, as the locomotives would be routed through some of the tightest lines through the capital. Later, the Terrier nickname, which most people know the locomotives for, was given to them because of their distinctive bark the locomotive's exhaust would make. Another nickname for these locos would come about later, and I'll explain that later in the video as well. Now, as I originally said, there was 50 of the class, and they worked commuter trains in and around London and the South East. During this time, the locomotives were painted into a livery known as Stroudley's Improved Engine Green, which, as you can see, is not at all green but an orchish colour. Now, some people debate why Stroudley called this green colour, and even some saying that he was colourblind. Personally, I think he called it an improved engine green as a tongue-in-cheek joke to annoy his workforce, as it is believed that Mr. Stroudley was not a favourite of the staff in the Brighton works. During 1878, number 40, Brighton, was taken to Paris to represent the LBSCR at the Paris exhibition, and this locomotive won a gold medal for workmanship. During a run between Dieppe and Paris, Brighton maintained a speed unheard of at the time on the line of almost 50 miles per hour. Sadly for the Terriers, during the latter part of the 19th century, these lines they once dominated and became more populated. The trains in the area became too heavy for these little locomotives to haul, and sadly the Terriers were replaced by the bigger D1 class, and their duties changed, and even some found themselves working on branch lines and even as shunters. Now, in the time the Terriers were at their peak, a little known fact is that two of the class were rebuilt into a 240 variant in 1905 for use on motor trains, but sadly this did not prove successful, and in 1913 they were returned to the standard 060 formation. One of these rebuilt locomotives did survive into preservation, and during her preservation she was again rebuilt into her original A1 form, and she is called Box Hill and now lives in the National Railway Museum in York. During the time that the motor trains were being tested on the main line, the rest of the class found themselves struggling to find work. Some of the class was sold off to different companies, such as the Isle of Wight Central Railway, New Haven Harbour Company, and even some rural railway companies, and onto private light railways such as the Kent and East Sussex Railway. In 1911, Stroudley was replaced by Douglas Marsh, and he rebuilt the surviving members of the class to the new A1X form, with new cylinders and new boilers, and given a new livery of Marsh Umber. And the modifications that Marsh added were also added to the other locomotives of the class that was in different ownerships, including the Isle of Wight locomotives. In 1918, 5 locomotives were brought by the British government and sent to Scotland to work for the US Navy at various locations, and these locomotives were numbers: number 37 Southdown, 79 Minories, 81 Blaeu, 83 Ellswood, and 38 Millwall. In 1923, an Act of Parliament was passed that merged the 120 railways in the UK to 4 big companies, known as the LNER, LMS, Great Western, and the Southern Railway. Now, during this time, there was 15 of the class still on the books for the London Brighton South Coast Railway, and this increased to 24, with the Southern Railway taking ownership of some of the routes that the earlier Terriers were sent to, including the Isle of Wight Railway. But there was 2 Terriers that were sold in 1925 and 1937 respectively to the Great Western Railway, numbers 2 Portishead and numbers 4 of the Western Clevedon and Portishead Railway, and both became part of the Great Western Railway fleet when the WCPR closed in May 1940. Now, the avid railway modeller watching will be in the comments saying, "Hold on, Hornby made a model of this and it was number 5, not number 2. Yes, Hornby did make a model of the Terrier, Portishead, and she is also numbered 5, but she was not numbered 5 until the line's closure. The loco was earmarked for preservation in 1950, but sadly this never happened, and it was scrapped in 1954, and number 4 was also sadly scrapped at the same time, but in 1948, after a brief spell in Nottingham. Now back to the Southern Railway. Many of the class remained in traffic, and Brighton was even restored into the Stroudley Improved Engine Green and was given departmental duties at Brighton Works with the number 380S and was renamed after the works it served. Now, during the takeover, the Hayling Island branch was a home for the Terriers, and most of them found work either on a branch line at Hayling or on other small branch lines and some small freight work. During this time, a new nickname was given to those locos that made it to the Hayling Island line, called Hayling Billy, and a pub on the island was given the same name, and in 1966 a new pub sign was placed outside the pub, and what better to use than a real locomotive. Number 46 Newington was placed on a plinth outside the pub until 1979 before being moved to the Isle of Wight Steam Railway and renamed W8 Freshwater. Nationalisation on the railways of the United Kingdom, and the Terriers are still going strong. 17 of the class remain, but Box Hill was already preserved in the original A1 form. All the others that were running on light railways or smaller branch lines during this time were A1X Terriers, and were given the classification 0P, meaning they were primarily passenger locomotives, but they was the least powerful on the system. During this time, the main routes you could find the little Terriers on was the Kent and East Sussex Railway, Hayling Island, and some on the Isle of Wight Railway, but their real home at this time for these locomotives was the Hayling Island branch. During British Railways ownership, the Hayling Island was a mecca for Terriers, running light loads over a lightly laid railway, and most of the now preserved Terriers had at one point or another had a spell on this branch line, including number 55 Stepney, Now, Stepney is best known for two things. Firstly, that it was the first standard gauge locomotive to arrive on its new home of the Bluebell Railway. And probably to the younger viewers, it is known for being a character in a much loved railway series by Reverend W. Awdry, and even has its own book called Stepney the Bluebell Engine. But before all that happened, the locomotives were working hard on all their homes, and even towards the end of British steam, they was called into service to haul special services on lines including the Kent and East Sussex Railway and the Hayling Island. And one of these trains saw numbers 32636 Fenchurch and 32670 pulling a top and tail train on the last day of operation on the Hayling Island, which was on the 3rd of November in 1963. Both Terriers were the last of their class in operation, and Fenchurch was the oldest working steam engine in British Railways ownership. Now there was 10 Terrier locomotives preserved, one of which has gone overseas to Canada. Number 54 Wadden now lives in the Canadian National Railway Museum, and she was gifted by British Railways to the museum in 1963. Wadden was not the only gifted terrier. Number 82 Box Hill was gifted to the UK's National Railway Museum in York, and the remaining 8 are dotted around the country. Numbers 55 and 72, Stepney and Fenchurch, are on the Bluebell Railway. Numbers 70, Poplar, and 78, Knoll, are on the Kent and East Sussex Railway. Number 70 is known as Number 3, Bodiam, and has a unique blue livery that she carried at a time on the Kent and East Sussex Railway. Number 62, Martello, is on the Bressingham Steam Railway, and was once owned by Mr. Billy Butlins and used to be used on his holiday camp at Ayr. Number 50, Whitechapel, is owned by Sutton Borough Council and is currently on the Spa Valley Railway. Number 46, Newington, as mentioned before, spent some time of its life outside of a pub on Hayling Island, now lives as number W8 Freshwater on the Isle of Wight Railway. Another Isle of Wight Terrier is number 40, Brighton. Yes, Brighton, the gold medal winning locomotive, is still going, but now called W11 Newport, and was also once owned by Mr. Billy Butlins, but was used at his holiday camp at Fwilly. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong. And that's it, the last remaining terriers. What a barking mad history. And this is only a small amount of the full history of these locomotives, and if you would like me to make more videos on these individual locomotives, then please do drop me a comment below on the locomotives that you want me to do. With that said, while you're down there, please do drop me a like if you have enjoyed this video, and why not subscribe to be notified on my next video. I try and make these videos once a month, and this year is a busy one for me, as in April myself and other TikTok creators are off to the Severn Valley Railway for the annual TikTok meet-up. Link will be in the description below. And once again, thank you for watching this barking mad episode of The Railway Tales.